Living with ADHD can be a challenge, and dating with ADHD is definitely a challenge, we've heard many of you say. But finding the right care and proper tools needed to succeed can be life-changing. Done is an online ADHD care platform that can get you all the resources you need to help manage your ADHD. Online visits, refills, and a 24/7 care team made for you. In just 1 minute, Done's online assessment can help kickstart your ADHD treatment journey. With experienced clinicians, worry-fill refills, and online visits, you can start getting personalized care as soon as today or tomorrow. So contact an expert team that can help you around the clock and get a personalized treatment plan just for you. Here's how you do it. Take a free 1-minute assessment and book an appointment with a licensed ADHD clinician as soon as the next day. Get continuous care, one-click refills, insurance coverage, and 24/7 care team support with Done for just $79 a month, and pharmacy copays as low as $0. Visit get.donefirst.com/podcast to learn more. That's get.donefirst.com/podcast to learn more. Done. Turn ADHD into your strength. The Dateable podcast is an insider's look into modern dating that the Huffington Post calls one of the top 10 podcasts about love and sex. I'm your host, Yue Xu, former dating coach turned dating sociologist. You'll also hear from my co-host, Julie Krafchick. On each episode, we'll talk to real daters about everything, from sex parties to sex droughts, date fails to diaper fetishes, and first moves to first loves. We are excited you've joined us for an older episode. While our earlier seasons were all about dating in San Francisco, we quickly realized all the themes and learnings are universal for all daters. So we shifted to covering dating from all around the world as the seasons progress. The fun part is, things happen first in San Francisco, the tech epicenter and counterculture capital of the world. We love for you to keep tuning in to our older episodes, but there is no set order to listen in, so feel free to jump to more recent seasons or relevant episodes for you. Enjoy the show.
I was so excited to get my shipment from Last Bottle Wines in the mail the other day, full of incredible red wines, all from Napa Valley. I love wine tasting, so having this to my door couldn't be happier. Also, couldn't be more excited that today's episode is brought to you by Last Bottle Wines. If you don't know already, they're a Napa-based online wine shop with a twist. They offer just one handpicked wine per day until it sells out, and they're always at incredible prices. We're talking 30 to 70% off retail. And the best part is that there's no subscriptions, no fees, and no minimum purchase. And I could not be more excited to bring this offer right now because they're having a marathon sale, which is coming up March 28th and 29th. Even better, we're offering Dateable listeners 10% off your first order with code DATEABLE. So if you are a wine lover like me, this is a great time to join. And did I mention that shipping is 100% free? So what are you waiting for? Mark your calendar for March 28th and 29th, or get on it earlier if you want. You can sign up at lastbottlewines.com and use code DATEABLE and find out why Last Bottle is the most fun way to discover and buy amazing wine.
The Dateable podcast is hosted by me. I'm Yue, a former dating coach in New York turned active dater in San Francisco. On each episode, you'll hear commentary by my co-host, Michael Vargas, a fellow dating coach with a clinical psychology background, my producer, Julie Krafchick, and other surprise co-hosts. This episode of Dateable is brought to you by 500 Brunches. 500 Brunches connects like-minded people with similar interests to meet in real life over brunch. You answer a quick questionnaire about your interests and how you spend your time, and then they'll match you in small groups of 6 to 8 at a brunch spot in San Francisco. Get a free entry into a brunch now by signing up at 500brunches.com and using the code DATEABLE. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dateable, a show that opens up a candid conversation about dating in San Francisco. We have a guest host in the house. His name is Harvey, and I just have to give you guys a little background on Harvey. Harvey and I met during Beta Breakers. But we met again later for our onesie party where Harvey came in a full bear costume, and he was one of the contestants on the dating game, which was such a success. And that's when he announced to the world that he has declared dating bankruptcy, which means he's not dating at all. So I figured if you're not dating, then let's just talk about dating, right? Perfect co-host for us. Harvey, do you have anything else you want to say about you that is interesting?
No, I have nothing else. Maybe we'll find out as time goes by.
Speaking of cool guests in the house, we have Chris here. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
He's got his sunglasses on. I'm guessing he was partying a little too hard last night.
I wish I was working, unfortunately, but yeah. So I've been working on a pretty cool project. Recently launched a site called Intrigue Me, a place where people can share fantasies to get inspiration to spice up their own relationships or to meet somebody to fulfill a fantasy they've always wanted to have.
But there is something else we want to talk about too,
Sure.
right? As we discussed.
Absolutely. To start, I've been involved in non-traditional relationships since college.
So non-monogamous.
Yeah, non-monogamous. I wouldn't say polyamorous. There's a sort of a bright line between those different sort of groups. But I've been practicing, and practicing is an active word, practicing non-monogamy for a number of years now, yes.
But not polyamorous.
Correct. You always have to be somewhat careful about talking about these because some people have very, very strong beliefs. The line between someone who says they're into non-monogamy versus someone who says they're polyamorous, in my mind, a polyamorous person has a deep desire to be with two or more people and have a serious emotional and physical connection, perhaps living with them, perhaps not, over a long period of time.
But seeking meaningful relationships outside of a two-person partnership.
Correct. So they want to be with somebody. They want to be with at least two or more people in a very serious way. Non-monogamy is just sort of like a broader umbrella term. There's a less of a focus on building relationships with a number of people, as opposed to just sort of maybe more openly going with the flow.
And you're saying you've never engaged in polyamorous relationship?
I have dated in a serious way more than one person at the same time.
And do they know about each other?
Yes.
And that's the whole point of having these non-traditional relationships, is that everyone's aware of the other partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, totally. So I think communication is the most important thing in any relationship, regardless if you're monogamous, if you're just hooking up with people, not dating, just sort of playing the field or whatever you want to say, or you're exclusively married to somebody, or you're in some sort of in a poly quad or something like that, right? So communication is inarguably the most important thing, and the advantage that I believe that non-monogamy has is it puts a very high value on open, candid communication about what you want, what you don't want, what you're afraid of, and what you're curious about.
Establishing boundaries.
Establishing boundaries. And you see, all of us have friends who are this couple who've been together forever, and everybody knows that they shouldn't be together, and everyone's like, how are they still together? And they're but they sort of are within this confines of this relationship. They seek sort of a security, but they may not be talking about the thing that they need to be talking about. And the reality is that non-monogamy can be really confronting, right? Seeing your partner flirting with, making out, or hooking up with somebody else can be very emotionally challenging, and so it forces these sort of hard conversations. And people who practice non-monogamy, and I say practice very seriously because it's sort of a learning thing. You're forced to sort of go through this and learn more about yourself and what you want in a partner, and what you're cool with. And sometimes you'll find that things that you believe are going to bother you because society tells you you need to be jealous, or if you see something you're somehow inadequate. If the girl you're with is flirting with some other guy, that somehow it's taking away from you. Might not really matter, right? It might be something that you've read in stories or whatever, and it's sort of ingrained in you. But the reality is, if you sort of experience this and sort of contemplate it and see how it affects you, you realize it's not really a thing, and it's not really a thing that bothers you. And that's I don't believe that non-monogamy is for everyone, but I believe that a lot of the lessons and a lot of the ideas within it are useful, no matter if you're very happily monogamous with somebody, to read books like Opening Up, Sex at Dawn, The Sperm Wars. Any of these books are very much about sex, monogamy, non-monogamy, etc. And they can be very useful tools, and the ideas within them are very useful for maintaining your monogamous relationship or exploring a non-monogamous one.
Do you get jealous anymore?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. Sometimes. I can get jealous. And the reason why that's sort of an interesting question is like, so jealousy has this like strong negative connotation, right? Like if someone gets jealous, we can all picture that guy or that girl who is like enragedly jealous, right? And they're just pissed off because they found that their partner may have flirted with somebody or cheated on them or whatever. And there's just like this sort of like green eyes and fire. And that's sort of like the connotation that the most Western people think about jealousy. But I often tell people who are like sort of like dipping their toes in the water is to think about, so like laughter, right? So laughter can be positive or it can be negative. You can laugh with somebody in a happy way, or you can laugh in a negative and sort of a demeaning way or a mocking way. And a lot of it has to do with the tonality and how you approach the moment and your frame of reference, right? And so there's one, I think that a lot of people sort of sat in jealousy and like experienced the emotion as opposed to just like having the immediate reaction they think they're supposed to have. They would realize that, jealousy can actually be really hot. The right amount of jealousy can fuel passionate relationships. Like relationships generally die when you're, not having sex, when you're sitting on the couch, when you're getting fat together, right? Like everyone has that sort of like that getting in the 30s, 40s, and getting older mentality or that fear. But when someone is jealous, that means that they care. And that's not to say that you want to be jealous and like screaming at each other all the time. That's not a constructive way of having a relationship. But there's a better way of thinking about being jealous that I think a lot of people don't approach.
Well, I want to go into intricacies of your boundaries.
Sure.
Like, what are your boundaries? What are typical boundaries that you see for other people? And when they're broken, you see jealousy.
So the one that I always see as sort of a red flag, in my opinion, is when you see people who are like somewhat interested in non-monogamy of some form, and they have like a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy, right? Like if I encounter someone like that at a bar or at a play party or at some sort of venue, I very quickly put on the brakes and take a step back. And the reason is because usually when people have that sort of policy, it's because they don't have the willingness or the tool set to sort of approach these challenging questions and like really have a candid conversation about what they do or don't want, what they can and can't have. But you see it all the time. Like it's very common, and that's not to say that like if you're with somebody and you're like and you're open and you go out on a date or your partner goes out on a date that they should tell you every gory detail about like the entire night. Some people are into that, some people aren't. But when you see people who are sort of like closed off and say like don't ask, don't tell, it's basically the same thing as unethical non-monogamy, right? So yeah.
So you like a relationship Sherpa to take someone from monogamy over to the non-traditional side.
I have
Take me to the
sure. So
Dark side of the moon.
yes, I have done it absolutely. Some of my partners, it was definitely their first time in like what would be considered like a real non-monogamous, like an open and ethical non-monogamous relationship, and I very much like part of actually why I started my project about intrigued me about sharing fantasies is I really care about and like creating experiences for people and letting people explore things. And that's like what I'm interested in doing. So it might not be like a specific fantasy or a specific act, but just like the general overall concept of like opening doors for people.
It's your fantasy to see them achieve their fantasy.
Yes, exactly. Very, very, very meta, I know. But no, it's true. Yeah, I mean,
But then who Sherpa'd you into non-monogamous relationships?
that was a long and rocky road. As I said, I've been involved in various forms of non-monogamy for probably the last 8 or 9 years. Some of it was, sort of like a classic sort of gateway. A lot of people get into it is through a long distance relationship, right? So you're with somebody who you really care about, but we were on either side of the country. And so we're like, yeah, sure, it's okay to see somebody else. I don't believe that if my partner is with somebody else, it diminishes me.
Because you're very secure.
No, I mean, I actually think I'm actually a very average guy. I think on all respects, I'm about average height, about average attractiveness,
average beard length.
Average beard length. I'm no Brad Pitt, and there's sort of this idea that if you're involved in these sort of crazy parties, or you're with lots of women or whatever, that you have to be like Brad Pitt or something, and I think that's
not at all.
Not true.
Especially in San Francisco.
Especially in San Francisco.
But I'm so curious, where did this come from? What are your parents like? What's their relationship like?
Oh, that's very interesting.
We're never gonna get to your dating story.
Yeah, we're not. They'll have to have me back, and we'll tell part 2 if you want to hear the story. So I actually come from a fairly conservative family, from a small town on the East Coast. And I think I had a very sort of classic upbringing. And then, I went to a tech school and then came out to San Francisco. I mean, it's a pretty classic sort of story arc. I think, I always had a strong interest in psychology and connection and people. And I think that's what started getting me reading about non-monogamy and other forms of relationships. And I had a series of regular relationships. And I've had, within the last years, I've had monogamous relationships and open relationships and so forth, and just always interested in trying different experiences and seeing, how things would.
So did the relationships be non-traditional, then you started reading, and then it became a way of life? Or were you reading first?
I think I was reading first. I think at a youngerish age, sometime in my teenage years, I got I was reading a lot of fantasy. And those sort of stories touch on a lot of this stuff, and so I got interested in it.
Do you remember the first book that sparked your interest?
I have no. I read stuff online.
Ethical Slut?
Ethical Slut is a classic one. But that was not the first. I don't remember what the first was.
It was Harry Potter or something. Ooh. How old are you?
I'm 29.
How many times have you been in love?
Ooh, that's a really hard question.
And have you been in love with 2 people at once?
I've never been in love with 2 people at once. I would say I've been in love 3 times.
And were all 3 of those in non-monogamous relationships?
Yes.
Have you come out of the closet to your parents about your non-monogamy?
No. Do you plan on coming out?
My mother learned actually of the project that I made about the fantasy site, and she did not approve.
So they're very traditional.
Yeah, very traditional. And so there's just conversations I can have and conversations I can't.
So I can just hear some of our listeners screaming, going, if you were in love with someone, shouldn't they be enough for you? Why do you have to seek out other people?
Sure. I mean, there's so many different philosophical ways of going about talking about that. Right?
What about just for you?
For me, what I would say is that there's no one can be all things to somebody else all the time. And relationships grow and ebb and fade and strengthen naturally over time. I've been in multi-year open relationships. And one of the things that I would say is sort of an advantage and a good, if you take a couple who's in a monogamous relationship, the idea, it's pretty much a fairy tale that if you're in a monogamous relationship or your relationship with anybody, right, that you are not going to find any other person attractive, right? Now, whether or not you act on your attraction to other people, whether it's slight or strong, is a whole other question, and it's a question of, self-control and a question of availability and serendipity. But oftentimes when people cheat, they statistically actually cheat with someone who's less attractive, less quote-unquote desirable than their primary partner. And the reason often is because that the classic human thing is to want what you cannot have. And because they're in the structure of this this monogamous relationship, and society says you're with this person, you're married or you're engaged or you're very serious, and you can't see this other person, that person becomes far more attractive to you, and then you might stray out of your relationship. And maybe you're very, very happy with this person that you're in the relationship with, but whatever series of events, a late night at the office that happened to spill over into an affair, will often like destroy or intractably damage the trust and the basis of a traditional monogamous relationship. And so what I often charge people to say is like, if you had flexibility, and I'm not saying that you need to be dating 5 people or 3 people or whatever, but if you have an understanding that like you can, enjoy the company of somebody else, that maybe you just want to have a drink with them, maybe you just want to flirt with them, maybe you just want to have make out with them, that might be enough, and you might learn what you wanted from that person and have that experience, and it would actually strengthen your primary relationship, and that relationship would survive. Whereas in a more traditional setting, because you cheated, because you stepped out, the person might not forgive you, or it might fall apart.
Can I also add that
Sure.
It's not just physical attraction? Like you just mentioned, it could be psychological.
Oh yeah,
emotional.
totally.
Like you said,
Strong.
not everybody can be everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's different voids being juggled and filled.
And some of this could be same gender relationships too,
Totally.
right? Are you
I am
open
straight.
to both? Okay.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've spent some time contemplating. I am quite straight, but I'm very like open-minded and like appreciate like all like forms of sexuality and what people want to have. And to the degree in which I'm not attracted to men is actually a curiosity of myself.
So you're not
Like,
attracted to Harvey right
no,
now? You don't want to kiss him?
No, I don't want to kiss Harvey.
But he's thought it through, which
Yeah.
not all guys do.
Yeah, yeah. Like I do very much believe that sexuality is a continuum, and we're all like people are on different spaces on it. But I'm very much to the hetero side.
So, I mean, a lot of people write into our podcast and say, how do people get into relationships? And they're just talking about one person. And here you are talking about having one relationship and then having multiple other sort of relationships.
Sure.
I mean, variations of relationships.
Sure.
How do you even keep track? How do you have time? How do you have the energy? What drugs are you on? Like, give us, what's your secret? What's your Google Calendar like?
Sure. No, that was actually, that's one of the running jokes about polyamory, right? Is that most of it is a calendaring problem. No, seriously, no.
An app for that.
No. There are. Believe me, they exist. No, like if they're the people who have like a number of serious partners that they've been with for a while will maintain calendars and schedules about who's seeing whom and when someone's sleeping where. And it gets even more and I'm so far removed from this as someone in their late 20s with no kids. There are people who are in their mid 30s, late 30s who have 2 kids, and they're with a number of couples who also have kids. And I can't even imagine the logistical nightmare that is. But people are doing it. So like finding time, like if for people doing that, it's really complex. For myself, like I am with somebody right now, and that she's my primary partner.
And you guys live together.
And we live together, yes. I'm not like actively dating anybody else. I might like grab a drink with somebody, meet someone up at a party, something like that. But I'm not like arranging my schedule in a really complex way.
Can I ask a vernacular question? If you met someone else and you started dating them, what would you call them? Not your primary partner, but something else.
Sure. There are people who very seriously use those sorts of terms. I would just say a partner or a lover or a friend, or some sort of like colloquial term kind of thing, or some sort of implication. I am less focused on like structures of relationships and like primary, tertiary, and that sort of thing. There's somebody who I love her very much, and she's definitely the person I am with, the person I live with. But other than that, there's awesome people in my life.
How do sleepovers work?
Oh, that's a great question. In past relationships, we've had sleepovers. We haven't, that's not currently part of our relationship.
So you guys do not sleep over at other
Correct.
people's places,
Correct.
and you don't bring people over to your place.
Correct.
So our esteemed producer, Julie, is also in the room, and she will interject every once in a while. You have something to ask?
Here's a question. Have you ever dated someone that is not open, or would that be a deal breaker to you?
No, I've dated people who are not open. As I said, in some ways, I'm somewhat of like a hopeless romantic kind of person, whereas like I'm more into like the the happenstance and the serendipity, right? Like if I'm at a bar and I meet somebody and there's like connection and like I want to just sort of like experience that and see where it goes, and so I may hook up with that person, or we may go out a date later or something like that, and I wouldn't like say, oh, like you're not into non-monogamy, or you're not into this, and so we can't see each other.
You don't discriminate.
I wouldn't discriminate. No, I think everyone is going to figure out for themselves what they want in life. And
would you tell them right away?
Depends on the context. Depends on like if I thought that the person was into me because they were like looking for a serious relationship, then I would have a more candid conversation with them. If it was somebody who I'm like, we met at a bar and it was just like drinks and like it's clearly like sort of like a one night stand kind of thing, then I probably wouldn't bring it up. Because it just like it doesn't really matter, right?
I want to go back to what Harvey was saying with the primary, secondary, tertiary.
Sure.
If you think about it, it's not really unique to open relationships because that's just casual dating.
Yeah.
When you go on a date with someone, you have no idea where you are in that lineup.
Totally.
You could have been their third date. They could have been on like 5 dates with someone else right before you. So you're secondary already in that situation. We, as monogamous daters, just don't openly talk about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely
But we really
true.
are in that sort of lineup. We just don't
Absolutely true.
communicate it.
And it's about being able to have that sort of candid conversation, right? If you're a dateable person in San Francisco, the odds that you're in or you're casually seeing one or more people is fairly high, unless you're choosing to be dating bankrupt.
I'm back on the scene now.
Oh, there you go. He's back on the scene. No, but like, so seriously, like, I mean, the point is like most available 20, 30, 40 somethings are actively hooking up with one or more people. And then like there's the concerns there is all about sort of communication and safety, right? Like, and that's why like one of the classic, and we haven't actually discussed it yet, but like one of the classic concerns that people bring up when you start discussing open relationships is like STDs and diseases and catching things, right?
But that's just dating.
Right. Exactly. No. Exactly. And actually, it's quite the opposite.
Safer for
Right. No, it's absolutely safer. Right. Like, so the people who I know who are committed to non-monogamy, they get tested monthly. They get tested like very serious about it. They're very serious about disclosing things. They're very serious about using condoms.
And we're all ashamed.
And there's a huge amount of shame around traditional monogamy and around hooking up with other people, and they sort of like people tend to get very drunk, and they get blotto drunk at a bar and like go home with somebody, and then they may or may not use a condom, and then it just causes all sorts of problems. So it's like the reality on the ground is that you're actually in my opinion, and I think the data would probably back it up, although I don't have the research, would be that like people who are like serious about non-monogamy are generally much safer about their sex because they spend more time thinking about it and more time talking about it.
It's conscious.
It's conscious, exactly. So if you go to a play party, there will be people drinking. There will be people like fucked up on various things, but actually it's going to be people are generally in better states of mind and better states of control because frankly you can't perform if you're really, really fucked up.
Let's do some takeaways because what I'm hearing from you is communication is so key, and we keep saying this on every episode, but it's so key because I think about the times when I've been upset with a partner, and it's because I didn't communicate my needs.
I couldn't say it, but I mean, like the great example was your previous podcast about that girl with the guy and when she fingered him, right? Like she felt weird because he didn't communicate his needs to her. He was embarrassed about it and unable to have a real conversation about it. She was embarrassed about it and like sort of unwilling to say, hey, like express herself in that situation. And so you have two people who might have had a great experience. They might have enjoyed each other way more, and they might have been dating right now if they had just been willing to sort of like own up and like talk about it. And that's something that you classically see in those sort of relationships.
Harvey, takeaway?
My takeaway is classic daters and non-traditionalists are very similar, but they define the relationship a little bit differently in the end.
Yep.
But potentially the non-traditionalists are more happy because they communicate better.
And also, it's just that we can't judge other couples. This is proof, right? Society can't say this is right, this is wrong in a relationship. What you consider cheating could be totally different for you and your partner versus someone else, right? Yep. So stop judging other partners and communicate your needs in your own partnership. Okay, do's and don'ts of people who are beginners in non-monogamous relationships. Let's do 2 do's and 2 don'ts.
All right. So again, I strongly suggest like reading something like Opening Up. Ethical Slut is very popular, but I think Opening Up is actually better. Like there's all sorts of people who've spent a lot of time thinking about these things, and it's just worth your time just to like learn from them, learn from their mistakes, because it's definitely not easy. Like you will be confronted by emotions, and like just you have to like be ready for that. Okay. So that's one strong do. A don't, I said like don't get into the sort of relationship which I was talking about, which is like the don't ask, don't tell, non-monogamy, which is just sort of like, oh, we're sort of cheating on each other but not telling each other about it. Like that's just ultimately going to be really sort of painful for everyone involved. Another sort of a do, I would say, I think do go to a play party. I think that I think
TBD.
TBD. I think that like there's something really interesting and freeing and different about that experience. That it's something that sort of like we don't like until you've gone to one, you don't really think that sort of experience exists.
Everyone's Googling play party right
now.
Yeah, exactly.
And like there's one every weekend in San Francisco. So like
Please
there's it's totally possible. And I think that people will have healthier relationships with their partners once you have like you free yourself and see like all of these options are on your table. You get less held up on things, right? You think about stuff more clearly. Another sort of like within that like don't ask, don't tell sort of relationship are the people who will get into non-monogamous relationships because their partner really wants it, or their partner wants to sleep with other people, and their partner basically says, I want to sleep with other people. We need to be we need to be open. We can't be closed. And if you're not okay with that, you don't have to be okay with that. You may be okay with that some point later in your life with somebody else, or you may never be okay with it. But you should not feel like you need to just like go in with that, because it won't go well. Like if that person wants to be with you, be together, be in whatever relationship you want to be in, but don't be held hostage into a relationship you don't want to be in.
Conscious couplehood. Yeah. Another do is share your fantasy on intrigueme.com. Yes. That's intrigue with an E like Edward. Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris, for being with us. Guys at home, if you have your own fantasy stories, your non-monogamous, non-traditional stories, we want to hear from you. Maybe you've been to a play party and you want to share that story. We want to hear that as well. So find us at dateablepodcast.com. Last but not least,
stay dateable.
In this episode, Chris mentions the book Opening Up, a guide to creating and sustaining open relationships by Tristan Taormino. So the action item for this week is for anybody flirting with the idea of non-monogamy or currently in a non-monogamous relationship. There's a great excerpt from the book that I want to read to you, and I just want you to think about it. Quote, "It would be unwise to agree to non-monogamy for the following reasons or with these hidden motives. 1, you're so in love with that person that while your gut is telling you no, you decide to say yes and we'll deal with it later. 2, you believe your partner likes the idea as an abstract concept, but it won't actually happen. 3, you agree to it, but secretly know you'll be enough for your partner and she won't ever want anyone else. 4, although your partner has said he is non-monogamous by nature, you know you can change him. And 5, you think it's just a phase and she'll get over it." So if any of the above applies to you, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue non-monogamous relationships. It probably means you and your partner are not on the same page. The most efficient way to meet new people is a combination of online and offline. 500 Brunches has your offline covered. Connect over brunch with new friends. Come alone or bring a buddy. There is always a table full of friendly faces, mimosas, and eggs Benedict. Sign up at 500brunches.com and use the code DATEABLE for a free entry. To connect with us, visit dateablepodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all under Dateable Podcast.